Hey everyone, and welcome back to Daily Tuition. In this lecture, we're going to understand what is JSON server and how to use it in Node application. We're going to see how to work with JSON server node module and create a simple application. So what is JSON server? A JSON server is a node module that you can use to create a demo REST JSON web service within a minute. All you need to do is just create a JSON file for a sample data. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And JSON server is going to allows you to access all the data of the JSON file using REST web service. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. A common task of front-end developer is to simulate a back-end REST service to deliver some data in a JSON format to the front-end application and make sure everything is working as expected. Of course, you can set up your full backend server example by using Node.js, Express, and MongoDB. This is what we call a mean or merge stack application. But however, this takes some time and a much similar approach to help you to speed up your front-end development time. But where you can use the JSON server? Let's say you're starting to work on your awesome application and you want to consume a remote data of some not finished yet API. Then you can use the JSON server. JSON server allows you to mock the API and provide dynamic access to data. It means that we can read, add, update, and delete data very easily using JSON server. You don't have to set up the Express server to work with API and create a complete MERN or mean stack application. JSON server will take care of all of it. JSON server will create a mock API for you using the JSON file. Enough theory, let's take a look at some practical examples. So let's first set up the Node application. Very first, I'm going to open the Visual Studio Code editor, and inside it, I'm going to open my empty tutorial folder. Here is the tutorial folder, which is completely empty, and inside it, I'm going to create a new folder. So I'm going to click on this new folder icon and specify the name for my project. I'm going to specify name JSON server. If you want, you can specify any name to this folder, that doesn't matter. And then I'm going to initialize this folder as node package. So I'm going to open my terminal. So I'm going to click on this terminal and say new terminal, or I can press Ctrl+Shift+ operator. I'm going to press it, and here you can notice this will just open the terminal. And now I just need to first enter into my JSON server directory. So here I'm going to say change directory JSON server. Let me press enter, and now let me initialize this project. Here I'm going to say npm init -y. -y will specify all the default values to the package.json file. npm init is a command to create package.json file, and this will initialize this folder as npm package. When I press enter, this will create the package.json file inside this folder. Here you can notice, and this will just initialize this project as npm package. Now let me close it, open my terminal, and I'm going to just clear the screen like this. Just out of that, inside the JSON server, I'm going to create a new folder and name it database like this. And inside this database, I'm going to create my database file. As I said earlier, JSON server work with a JSON file. So I'm going to create a new file inside this database. Here I'm going to say db.json. Now this is the mock file of the API. Let me just close this terminal, and here let me just add my data. So what I'm going to do is, this is a type of JSON file. So I'm going to start with curly braces like this. And inside these curly braces, I'm going to first specify articles. And in this article, I have multiple articles. So I'm going to put all the articles inside the array like this. And inside this array, I have multiple articles. So I'm going to put that articles inside an object like this. So in this array, on the first index, I have this object. And inside this object, I'm going to create a property ID and specify one to it. I'm going to uniquely identify this article. So I'm going to specify ID here. Then specify here title. Title is going to be build an API using JSON server. Just out of that, I'm going to add another property, which is author ID. And just out of that, I'm going to specify author ID. So this article is written by author 2. To make this tutorial simple, I'm not going to add multiple properties here. Instead, I'm going to just add these 3 properties to this first object and duplicate it. So I'm going to copy this object and create my second article. I'm going to specify here comma and create my second article here. Then I'm going to change this ID and say here ID 2. Just out of that, I'm going to just specify here build an API using, and I'm going to just replace this JSON server to Go. Now just out of that, just out of this article, I'm going to add comments of this article. So instead of adding all these comments inside this object, I'm going to add that just out of this array. So here I'm going to specify comma, and down here I'm going to say comments. And in the array, I'm going to put different comments of these articles. So here, instead of typing all the content of the comment, I'm going to copy and paste some data inside it. So here I'm going to have ID of the comment, body of the comment, and the article ID. So on article 1, I have this comment. And just out of that, we have second ID with body, and we have this comment on article 2. Just out of that, I'm going to create the author section where I'm going to add different author of this article. So down here, I'm going to specify comma and say here author. Then specify array. Inside this array, I'm going to add my different authors. So I'm going to copy some data and paste it inside this author like this. So we have 2 author, 2 comments, and 2 articles inside this database. This author have ID, username, and the title. Then you can notice here we have the same to the second author as well. Save the changes, back to the top, and let me show you how you can access this data using JSON server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my terminal, and here I'm going to say npm install, and I'm going to install the JSON server. In Node, JSON server is not built in. So you need to install the JSON server package when you want to work with it. So I'm going to just say here npm I for install and say JSON server. When I press enter, this will automatically install the JSON server inside my node modules folder. So this will create a node modules folder right here, you can notice, and inside it I have this JSON server module. Let me clear the screen, back to the package.json file, and let me just add here, just out of this test, here I'm going to add my start command and say here JSON server, and I'm going to specify my file name, this one, db.json. So here I'm going to specify database / db.json. So I'm going to pass the path of this db.json file to this JSON server. Let me show you the magic when I execute this start command. Let me save the changes, open the terminal and say npm start. When I press enter, you can notice you have the result something like this. In the terminal, you have resources and the home page of your JSON server. Let me first open the home page. So let me just click on this console link. When I press Ctrl click, this will open up a new tab on my Chrome browser, and here you can notice we have the JSON server home page. Here we have a successful message. In the resources section, you can see we have 3 resources: articles, comments, and author. We can access all these resources very easily with JSON server. Let me just back to my Visual Studio Code editor. Now you don't have to worry about these console messages. Just take care of these resources. This resources is used to access your data of this db.json file. Using these resources, you can easily access all the data of your db.json file. Let me show you how you can do that. So let me click on this first article link. This will open my browser on localhost 3000 / articles. We have the result something like this. We have an array of 2 articles. Let me just back to my home page. And here you can notice we have the comments resources as well. Let me click on it. This will just print all the comments. Let me click on this author as well. And this will print all the authors of my database. Great. We have set up the API mock. Let's see how to consume it and how to work with it. So instead of working with this browser and test these resources, I'm going to use the Postman API testing tool to test this API. So I'm going to open my Postman API testing tool. Postman is a software for testing APIs. So I'm going to use the software to test my APIs. It actually used to send the request to the API and get the response from it. If you don't have this application installed in your local system, just search for Postman. That's it. Here you can find the postman.com website, and from here you can download the Postman application. Once you download it, just open it and open a new tab. So I'm going to just click on this plus icon, and here you can notice I can make a new request from here. So let me just make a get request on this article resources. So here I'm going to first specify the get request. So I'm going to select this get, then specify this address like this, and then I'm going to just make a request on this resources articles. So here I'm going to say articles, this one. When I click on this send button, you can notice I'm going to have my articles as a response. Using this postman, you can get the status code, the time of execution, and the size of this response as well. Postman is very useful tool for testing your APIs. Now, just like that, let me just make a GET request on comments to get the comments. So here I'm going to just specify these comments. So I'm going to say here comments. When I click on the send button, as you can notice, this will just return 2 comments of my articles. At the last, I'm going to just make request to these authors. So I'm going to make a GET request to authors. When I click on the send button, this will just return the data of these authors. You can notice this will return all the authors of my database. You are not limited to just access the resources. To access and modify resources, you can use any HTTP method. Here you can notice we can use get, post, put, patch, delete, and options. We can use any HTTP method to modify these resources. Once we understand how to get all the articles, all the comments, and all the authors, let me show you how to get a specific article. I'm going to open the Postman and click on these articles. I'm going to just make this GET request to this article, and I want to get my first article. So I'm going to specify here / and say 1. When I make a request, when I click on the send button, as you can notice, this will just return the first article from my JSON database. And if I want to get my second article, I'm going to specify here 2. When I click on the send button, I'm going to have my second article. You can notice here. You can do the same with comments and author as well. If I say here comments, when I click on the send button, it will return the second comment as a response. And if I say here authors, and if I want to get my first author, I'm going to say here 1. When I click on the send button, it will return the first author. We can use almost all kind of URIs to perform requests. For example, now what I want to add another article inside my database. I can make a post request for that. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to select this post, and then I'm going to select here article like this. And then, as you know, this is a type of post request. So you need to specify body to this post request. So I'm going to select the body and select the raw data. I'm going to click on this raw, and here I'm going to select the JSON format. I'm going to send the data of type JSON. So here I'm going to specify curly braces, and inside these curly braces, I'm going to pass my third article. So let me just back to my editor, close this terminal, and open my db.json file. Here you can notice I only have 2 articles here. Let me just copy my second article and paste it right here, like this. And then I'm going to change this ID to ID 3 and specify here build an API using Postman. And then author ID is going to be 2. When I click on the send button, it will create this article in my db.json file right here. Let me show you. When I click on the send button, you will get the body as a response, and in the db.json file you have your third article. You can notice here. And now if I want to access this third article, I can simply make a GET request on article 3. So I'm going to specify here / and say 3. And I don't need to specify any body, so here I'm going to say none and click on the send button. When I click on it, this will return the third article as a response. Now what if you want to update this data? In case if you want to update this data, you can make a patch HTTP request. For example, I'm going to just click on this post request right from here, and instead of this post, I'm going to select patch request to update this data. And then I'm going to just make a request on article 3, and I want to change the author ID of the third article. As you know, I have author ID 2 here. Instead of 2, I want to update this author ID and specify ID 1. So I'm going to just first select this article using patch HTTP request and specify body, and inside this body I'm going to say here author ID 1. When I click on the send button, it will update this record and specify author ID 1. When I open my db.json file, here you can notice this will update this record automatically. This will update this record. Now what if I want to delete my third article? Right from here, I'm going to just back to my Postman, select the delete HTTP method. You don't need to pass any body with this delete method, so I'm going to say here none, but you need to pass the article which you want to delete. I want to delete my third article, so here I'm going to say article 3 and click on the send button. When I click on it, this will delete my third article and return an empty object. This means the third article is now deleted from your database. When you open the db.json, you can notice the third article is now deleted. Now, suppose you want to filter this data. Now, what if you want to filter this data? I want to filter this data using this author ID. I want to get all the articles of author 2. So I'm going to open my Postman, and here I'm going to make a GET request. And right here, I'm going to say articles and back to the params. And I'm going to just add the query parameters inside this Postman. So here, I'm going to select a key, and inside this key, I'm going to specify this author ID like this. And I want to get all the data of author ID 2. So I'm going to specify value 2 here. You can notice the URI is automatically changed, and we have the question mark, the key, and the value of this key. And now when I make a request to this URI, I'm going to have my second article. You can notice here, I'm going to have my second article. This will just return the second article which have author ID 2. I can do the same with author ID 1 as well. That's upon you. You can filter the author ID 1 as well. That's upon you. Now, just after that, what I want to get a comment of my second article. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to simply make a GET request on comments, and I want to get a comment of my second article. So here I'm going to just specify this property article ID to this param, and I want to get the comment of my second article. So here I'm going to specify 2. When I click on the send and make this request, as you can notice, this will just return a comment of the second article. I can do the same with author as well. If I want to get the author of the first article, I can just make a request with this ID property. So if I say here authors, and inside these params, if I say ID, I want to get the author of the first article. So here I'm going to say ID1. I'm going to pass this ID right here like this. Then I'm going to specify value 1. When I click on the send button, this will return the author of the first article. Now, as you can notice, you can work with different HTTP methods using JSON server. Now, there are a lot more you can do with JSON data. This is just a simple example. You can do a lot more with it. Now, what if you want to set up this JSON homepage? Now, you can notice this is a default JSON server homepage. Let me show you how you can customize this JSON server homepage. When you start the JSON server, you will get a default homepage of the JSON server. You can set up the JSON homepage with a custom HTML file. To do that, create a simple public folder and put the index.html file inside it. So I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code editor, and right here inside this JSON server, I'm going to create a new folder and name this folder public. And inside this public folder, I'm going to create a new file and say index.html. I'm going to first specify the simple HTML5 snippet here like this. Then specify title, JSON server, and the body is going to be h2 JSON server custom HTML file. So I'm going to specify this title to this HTML file, save the changes, and restart the server. Let me just stop the server and execute the npm start command again. When I reload the browser, I'm going to have my custom HTML file as a response to this JSON server. We have the custom HTML file as a response from the JSON server. Now suppose you want to make an authentication with JSON response. You want to authenticate the user before the user make a request. You can do that with JSON server very easily. Let me show you how you can do that. I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code editor, and inside the JSON server, I'm going to create a new file and name it server.js. And here I'm going to set up the JSON server. So I'm going to say here constant JSON server is equal to, and say here require, and I'm going to just include the JSON server module. So here I'm going to say JSON server. Just after that, I'm going to say constant server is equal to JSON server dot create. Now this statement is going to return the Express application. This is going to create an Express application instance and specify that to this server variable. Just after that, here I'm going to say constant router is equal to JSON server dot router, and inside it I'm going to pass this database file db.json. So inside this database, here I'm going to say dot /database, and specify db.json file. So I can access all the resources of this db.json file. Just like that, here I'm going to say constant, and then I'm going to call the JSON server defaults middleware. And just out of that, down here I'm going to say server.use. I'm going to call use method of server to add different middlewares. So here I'm going to say middlewares. So I'm going to call the default JSON server middlewares, and then I'm going to call my authorization. So down here I'm going to say server.use, and inside this use I'm going to create my own middleware. So here I'm going to create a function with request and response parameter, and then I'm going to pass the third parameter next. And I'm going to call here the arrow function, and inside this middleware you can add your authorization logic and then specify your next function here. So if we have the valid user, I'm going to execute this middleware and continue to the JSON server router. So down here I'm going to say server.use, and inside it I'm going to pass this router, this one. So now I'm going to pass all these resources using this server.use method. So this will add all the resources when I start the server. At the end, don't forget to start the server. So here I'm going to say server.listen. I want to listen the server on port 3000, and I want to display a message on the console when I start the server. So here I'm going to say console.log, and in the backtick operator I'm going to say JSON server is started on HTTP on port 3000. Let me save the changes. Let me start my server. Let me open my terminal, stop my previous server and clear the screen. And then I'm going to just specify this server.js file to this start command. So here, instead of the JSON server, I'm going to say here node server.js. Save the changes, open the terminal and say npm start. When I press enter, oops, I'm going to have an error message. No such file or directory database.db.json. I'm going to have this error right here. Oops, I forgot to add here dot. Save the changes, open the terminal, clear the screen and do the same. I'm going to say here npm start. This will just start the JSON server on port 3000. Let me open it. So here I'm going to say localhost 3000, reload the browser, and as you can notice, this will start the server with this custom index.html file. If you want me to create a beautiful project on JSON server, then let me know in the comment section of this video. So I hope you understand how to work with JSON server using Node application. JSON server will save you a lot of time and effort. It provides an API so we can work with front end with no worries about API calls. Like this video if you find anything useful. Subscribe for more latest videos. That is all for now. I will see you in the next one.